So, I've been playing with chatbots a bit recently, for years really, but recently got back into being hooked on them for a bit. And they've improved tremendously, a number of changes over the last few months, even in terms of what's available, etc. You may have heard of things like ChatGPT, which is just using, I think, the GPT-3 language model underneath it, and GPT-4 is coming up fairly soon, which is a much larger model, and should be much more powerful. But I also ran across a news video, which I posted to Facebook in case you're on there. Yeah, not just on there, but in case you are viewing me or following or whatever it is one does, or friends. I know they're both existent models. For the most part, I think I have friends, but just because I'll say yes to anything. But this little news clip was an interview with a professor who was somewhat lamenting the difficulties that they're facing dealing, and I think a philosophy professor, in terms of being able to catch plagiarists now. And it's not really plagiarism, right? And he actually points this out. The problem with these chatbots, which can write you an essay, they can give you style. Like you can input, give me it in this, just to be completely ridiculous, make it talk like a pirate, and write this, or something like that. But you have a tremendous amount of capability to sort of tweak the AI. And that's just going to get more and more intense, where maybe you can feed it some of your own writing to let it train on your particular style of writing, and then adapt that to what you want written. But what he was saying was, we've had this problem forever, basically, which is that someone could hire someone else to write an essay, or even to take a test for you in some cases, where it's a large enough operation that someone else could slip in and pretend to be you, And, to some extent, sure, there's ID and everything, but, you can find someone who looks kind of like you, who's smarter than you, and that's good enough, and they take your ID in. But now it's available to everyone. And he was proposing a couple of different solutions to this. Well, a couple of different things that schools will need to do. One is they have to obtain better means of detection. Well, honestly, that's going to be impossible. The only means of detection that's available right now is sort of the instructor saying, I know how this guy writes, that's not it. The computers are going to get better at matching your own style and matching, more importantly, the expectations of what your teacher thinks your style will be. It's also kind of a bogus way to do things, because just as you put on different personalities, maybe when talking about or in different circumstances, you might put on different personalities of writing, depending upon even just the subject matter or your engagement with it or whatever. So it's a little unfair. There might be, exceedingly expert people, just like there are handwriting analysis people. There might be AIs that can do this, but I wouldn't trust your average professor to be able to determine, hey, is this really you, in terms of that. So you no longer have any means of like, well, can I see, did they just copy someone else's work who's either, did it previously or it's on an online database of copy papers. And then the second thing was to have the administration at the schools somehow be stricter in, accepting less evidence, essentially, for you have cheated. Here's the problem I have. And it doesn't just apply, so, creative writing is sort of the first point in this, but we've had this for a while, okay? Now, in mathematics, especially, certain things like calculus and geometry or algebra or whatever, which, you're not really doing mathematics, right? You're training in general how to solve problems, how to solve problems that at some point or another were real types of problems that people had to solve. The introduction of calculators, and especially of more powerful graphing calculators, became a real problem. Now, they were disallowed on tests, but not on homework, this, that, and the other, because there's no way to really stop someone from using them on homework. But what you really have to ask yourself, and I had a professor in college, this is way back, right? Well, not all that way back, but this is in the 80s, computer science and discrete math professor, who was strongly had the conviction that we should not be teaching arithmetic to students anymore, because we have a tool that can handle that. Now, I'm going to say that that's not good, right? Because I have a calculator that sometimes fucks up. How can that happen? Well, I don't know. It's got kind of an intermittent solar power supply. Actually, I don't think it works anymore at all. I may have thrown them out. But it's got like an intermittent solar power supply. And every now and then it gives just a wrong answer, You can't absolutely rely on the tools. We need to train people so that they're capable of at least being able to catch the tool is telling me something wrong. There's something wrong here, right? Something's not working right. I know that can't be the case. We have to give them at least that baseline understanding, which does mean that some of that rote arithmetic is necessary. Some of that rote calculus work is necessary. I'm not sure we need to test people on it, though. I'm not sure, and I can tell you for certain, we don't need to send them home and come back with a paper demonstrating that they can do it. Now, an analogous situation is in computer science itself. Used to be, and maybe it still is in some classes, students were given an assignment, really a toy type assignment as their project. Some kind of thing that was known and solved, and it's like, here's how you do this. And before the internet was super popular, that was effective enough. It engaged the brain, you had to figure out the answer, and perhaps the biggest bonus of all was that the instructor knew what the correct answer was. But and you have this kind of thing showing up, sometimes in programming tests and stuff that you're sent home with. That you come from an interview and whatnot. Now, the problem with these is a lot of them have solutions online, right? This is the plagiarism problem all over again. But now the AIs are capable of solving these as well. And they're capable of solving ones that maybe aren't already out there and solved. So even if I, as a professor, think up a more clever, not that I am, but not right now, think up a more clever little toy problem to give to the student, or even a real problem. I mean, as long as it's not, a PhD worthy thing, I wouldn't expect, I wouldn't be shocked if an AI could solve it. If I give these clever little tricky problems to students, and then they look online, and then they use an AI and it solves it for them in a couple of minutes, more or less, I'm not really doing anybody any favors, right? Now, if the student had to do as maybe I had to do and lie down on the couch and think about it and kind of dream about it for a couple of days before coming up with, yeah, I think this works, and then actually putting it, to effect, and then the to effect gets graded, including such stupid things as, does it actually work, in the sense of, does it compile, do all these, do all these little, does it get within the right margin of error and whatnot, where it's under this constrained toy problem situation, and constrained in time as well, where I'm not really able to put my full resources into it. Well, if those aren't going to work anymore, if those are going to be solvable by an AI, we have to definitely rethink that. Now, I know for a fact, even over a decade ago, 15 years ago, say, when I was in grad school, which is far removed from when I say I was in college, the classes we were teaching for a fairly introductory computer science course. Now, the very, very most introductory ones are like learning arithmetic, right? I'm not going to grade, you're not going to hand in homework to me and I grade whether you did 2 plus 3 correctly, right? You just have to know it. And writing it down, doing it by rote, that may be the best way to do it. Similarly, the tiny little types of problems that would be handed as homework for the most introductory computer science programs or classes, which are along the lines of, write a loop that sums the first 100 that finds the first 100 prime numbers or whatever, and explains the whole situation so that really the student understands what they need to do completely clearly, what they need to, the tricky part is understanding how a loop works, right? And they could copy it off of somewhere, and I don't care. Then they didn't learn, And then when they face the same kind of problem on a test, they're not going to be able to do it because it really is like a 2 plus 3 problem. In terms of, it's orders of magnitude harder, but in terms of like what you're facing, it's, here's the problem clearly defined, here's the solution you need to come to, actually just implement it in a way that I can see that how to use this language and how to use basic functional programming or whatever style we're looking at. That's a very different step. So this was like second year students who have some of the basics down and are now being told, look, here's what I want you to do. Write a little game that, interests you, right? And similarly, I had an AI class where our main project was implement, an AI which can solve a game. I don't know if that was actually the only possible solution, but it was basically, hey, write something that makes, good moves for this particular. No, it was actually for a particular game. It was the game was Konami, which was kind of an interesting game, and there you're really looking more at that's a problematic type of thing, though, because that's the kind of problem that you're looking. So this was a little before this was my second undergrad, a little before I went to grad school, and this is the kind of problem that you can look up either online, or if it's not there, an AI could solve it for you, right? So it's not really a reasonable type of problem to face a student with. Whereas the one that we used at UO was basically you make up a game and you present it, and it's really just a means of the students exploring and playing around with their own activity. And being able to gain something from the course. Here's the problem, though. Again, an AI could do that. You could go find that kind of code online and put it together. So I would argue that in the computer side of things, what we'd want to do is figure out what it means, because when you get into the damn workforce, you have these time limits, you have a problem in front of you, very much like in school, whatever. The times are different and stuff, but whatever. You have some situation you have to deal with, and you have whatever fucking resources you can bring to bear that aren't going to get you into copyright trouble, right? So if you run it through an AI and it works, that's great. If you go find your solution online on how to, write this little widget for a web page, that's great. It's only about the results, It's about you knowing how to get the results. And it's not about, well, could you have figured this out on your own? Now, at the highest levels, it is really important to be able to figure things out on your own. But I'm not really sure that you can train people to figure things out on their own as the only as your only pedagogical tool. I don't think that's necessarily the best way either. I think you want to encourage that. I think you want teachers who, if the student's okay and doing fine with their normal, is doing okay with their regular work and really doesn't need to be doing all this homework, maybe, and shows an interest towards branching out and exploring other stuff, you let them. You don't force them into this sort of rigid curriculum where they have to take X, Y, and Z to get their little piece of paper that says, I'm now employable, and get hired by a company which doesn't use any of what you learned, but basically trains you all anew, other than the very basics. The very basics, they're necessary. So yeah, in the computer side of thing, I think it would be good to have at least a portion of work that's involved around, or potential work that's involved around not necessarily getting results, but exploration, and that's it. And you get graded on how well you seem to be exploring, and if you don't really seem to be exploring, maybe that's not the path you belong on. And that would be the path that, your prospective researchers would go on to. On the other hand, the other path should be about getting results. And getting results means figuring out how to use all the tools that are available at that time. Now, the tricky part is what really should be being taught is not the tools that are being used right now, but the tools that are going to be available in 3 years, 5 years, or whatever. That makes the instructor's job really, really hard, and they have to be absolutely top-notch, looking at research, saying things like, if you had, and we had some of this kind of baked into things, where you have questions, if you had an oracle that told you this, what would it mean you could do, and stuff like that. All right, so I think you can do that kind of thing in a more technical branch. What about in the humanities? Well, in particular, in the social sciences, where writing papers is what it's all about, right? Writing papers is the entirety of what it's about. Why should it be any fucking different? When you get a job in a situation where you have to write clearly and communicate, and there really aren't that many jobs that is sort of the primary purpose, right? There's a certain level of writing clearly and whatnot, but there's very, very few jobs where what you're doing is writing, historical research dissertations or anything like that, right? There aren't jobs for that outside of academia for the most part. Journalism and stuff fits a little bit like that, but why shouldn't it be the same? The important thing there, again, is the output. The output is what's important. The ideas may be of value, but it really doesn't strike me that the tasks that maybe my generation was taught from make sense anymore. And in a way they don't, schools have accepted, hey, you can use Google to start your process. That can get you, online versions of actual, source documents, either transcribed or, in PDF form. There's all kinds of different capabilities that allow you access to stuff in a way that never used to be the case. And once you're at that point, what is really the difficulty? What is wrong with letting the AI formulate the core principle behind it? Now, one of the things that's wrong is, oh look, it just spewed out a take on, whatever topics engaged. So for example, if you're making a position paper type thing, it spewed out a take, you didn't think about it, you didn't do anything to get there. But in a lot of ways, academia already just sort of pats you on the head for saying the right thing well. You have to be really careful when you're saying the wrong thing. So, is it really any different to encourage our students to reflect the right thing and to use their style guides or an AI to help them to generate the eventual output? Obviously, if the output's expected to come from an AI, first of all, the professor should even the field out by letting everybody, know, hey, this is a really good tool, and I would like it if you use this. I think it's the best one, but you don't have to. You can use other tools if you want to explore. Exploration is important. And then where the key kind of comes is a combination of, say, looking at the analysis that's presented and then challenging the student on the paper afterwards. Every student, to make sure that they can defend it, that they have obtained the understanding of the material enough to have to have written the paper, as it were. Not necessarily that they have all the literary skills necessary to do it. Not that they necessarily went out and did all the research, but that they read what they saw and considered it and decided, yes, I agree with what the AI did. There you're in the position now of the person who is checking the work to make sure it's okay. It's like doing a math problem with a calculator. Now, it makes the grading horribly more difficult, if that's the model. But I think we need to move towards some kind of model that's not simply, yeah, I read your paper and it reads nicely and you make some cogent arguments, and maybe I mark on a couple of places, what about this? Did you consider this? Well, those what about this, did you consider this, those become the key to the grading at this point, right? You don't just write them in the margin. You bring the student up to present their paper, essentially, and to defend it, just like you would, with a thesis or whatever. I think at that level, and obviously, look, it's going to cost more. But look at all the time that's been saved, in a sense, in terms of worrying about all the Picayune stuff that the AI is taking care of, and worrying about going into those details. Honestly, I find testing to be an iffy prospect, anyhow. It's really, when it comes down to it, and this is why this is why corporations demand a college degree, is what it comes down to is, are they willing to do some work, so that, like, when we hire them, we know they'll put effort in. That's what it really comes down to. This is the wrong thing. This is not what education should have ever been about. That kind of vetting should come out in the interview process, and maybe in a first year, trial hire or something along those lines. That should not be the main goal of our education system, especially higher education. And I've gone into this before, maybe not under those exact words, but I've gotten close to this topic before. So I think what we need is a shift in the pedagogical paradigm. It's got to go away from what it's been, which is, can you express your thoughts clearly in a paper, and express not even unique and individual and groundbreaking ideas, nothing like that. Can you write the paper that we've been asking students to write for the past 30 years, or 50 years or whatever? Can you do that? And the answer is no. It doesn't matter anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. That's like asking someone, can you calculate this derivative with paper and pencil? Or then, can you calculate it using a slide rule? I don't care. I don't care anymore. You're never going to use a slide rule. And pencil and paper? Probably not, right? The only reason that you want to use the pencil and paper is to be so deep down close in the weeds of the mechanisms involved that you're able to look and say, that ain't right. That ain't right. Okay? That's the only need that we have for being able to physically do it. To be able to mechanically calculate it in our own minds. Something analogous is happening in terms of creative operations now, right? Creative operations are becoming more a matter of utilizing uh, the most modern tools to obtain the output that is helpful or valuable, and that others will appreciate, or that you'll appreciate. And that's what we need to focus on training, and that's where we have to rethink, at least in higher education, and I think all the way down through the line. We have to rethink what the goals are, and we have to do it iteratively, and maybe on a generational basis, approximately. Just keep coming up with new ways of teaching that meet the new world that's out there as a minimum, and that more importantly, prepare you for what is likely to be out there. Anyway, those is my words on this. See, that's what happens when you don't actually worry too much about the grammar.